Welcome to the HPTV Podcast. We're back. Stephen, Jamie, or her name is HPTV, and Mitch Marsh here again to talk you through this very hot summer and talk some Harry Potter, some hot takes, some hot news. There actually hasn't really been any news. Have you guys seen anything come out? Any good rumors we should be looking into?
A lot of people complaining about the cast because people love to complain. That's
Are
what
they
the whole reason the
still?
internet was developed, apparently.
I actually haven't heard a lot of that, but I can see it. This is a couple weeks old now because we had a little vacation there, but that JK read the
You
first...
guys had a vacation. I'm waiting on a baby.
You're waiting on a baby. That she
You'll
read
get your
the
baby
first
vacation, so.
2 episodes, and she really likes them, which literally means nothing to me because there's been past cursed child issues, Fantastic Beasts issues, but that is nice, and it kind of gives you an idea of what's existing right now. So at least there's 2 scripts. Woohoo! And then someone pointed, this is very unverified, but someone posted on Reddit that someone in the London comedy circuit, who's relatively small, has been offered the role of Peeves. So that's interesting. I thought they would try to get someone bigger for Peeves, but maybe they haven't been able to.
But this does mean that Peeves is going to be in the freaking show,
Yes.
so that's a win.
I think they
yes,
knew,
yes.
like, that's one. If you're going to cut something different, like, they knew that was the one missing from the films. That's a pretty easy get. I mean, Peeves kind of disappears in a lot of ways.
It's true. He doesn't turn out to be all that important.
This person would have to commit to the full 10 years on and off because Peeves is pretty much in every book. So if you're going to really show him, so maybe someone who would
but not
be
too
willing
much
to pop
filming.
in and out.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll find a way to tie him into the bigger story, make him more. I wonder if there's like a lost, thread that JK decided not to include in the books or something that they can use. He's important, I swear.
Well, and I kind of hope that they would get Simon Pegg to do it, but he was asked in an interview if he would be interested in doing Harry Potter, and he said no, because he's just getting done with Mission Impossible, doing that for 20 years. So he's like, I don't really want to sign on to like another long-term thing.
He was excited for his homie.
Yes.
But he acts like that's... He's been in, 7 of them? So it's like, he's 6 months of filming 7 times. It's not like you've done that much, Simon.
You're fine.
I mean, he has to do slightly more than Ving Rhames, who usually has to be on 2 sets sitting in front of a computer.
But not as much as Tom. Did
you guys see the most recent Mission Impossible?
No, I'm anti-Tom Cruise.
I did see it, actually.
It's not very good, but like there's some fun bits. But the first hour is definitely like a celebration in a way that's not what made this thing special. It was more the individual moments. Like it was celebrating them and essentially calling Tom Cruise Jesus, which Tom Cruise doesn't even believe in Jesus. He believes in Urgu. That's not the name. I can't remember the name of the... I have Wikipedia and Scientology, but I can't remember. We just definitely insulted our Scientologist listener.
But no, first, it was very heavily like an homage to the previous movies and all of that, which is funny because now they're talking about possibly making another one. It's just like, but it was a bit of a bummer because the way they built it up, like it felt like it was going to have more closure. It was going to be more of a full circle. And it was good. It was just not, what I felt like it had been hyped up to be.
Had 2 long set pieces that were... A couple other things I've seen Potter related is just that a lot of kids have been filming it, and so it wouldn't surprise me if more casting has happened than we know of named characters, and they are filming stuff with students, with kids. And along with that, some people said, maybe it'd be interesting to get some moments of Ron and Hermione away from Harry, like Hermione getting her Hogwarts letter. I don't think they'd do that story because that's quite complicated in the Muggle world, but like something with Ron and his family without Harry there, like getting to know them in any way away. I don't think that takes from the story. Jamie, we got to
stick to the books. You're going to overcomplicate.
Well, if we only have 6 episodes for every season, we're going to have to.
Yeah, we don't have time.
And then the last interesting thing... There's a discussion about who people think should do the score. I don't think we're going to get a big name because it's such a commitment to score the episode. You might get someone who's going to like do a couple big things, but I think most even filmy people have only heard of like 5 to 10 film composer, unless that is your thing. But it did make me think like that is something that could have a dramatic effect on the feel. And we kind of brushed on this before, and so I'm curious to see if they do try and if they say like we're gonna get this big name in to maybe do some of the theming and stuff before, but not do every episode. But I hope it's good, catchy music.
It's gonna be interesting. Even like all the things that we don't love about the movies, the music is such a like big part
Iconic.
of like Harry Potter in general.
And it's positive.
Now.
Like there are so many more themes that I know than I would have ever thought. People are like, oh, remember this from this moment in this movie. I'm like, yeah, that comes right back to you. And when you're like in the theme parks and they're playing different bits of those scores, it is definitely one of the things you can't really fault from them.
But it's like, do they try to do something similar, or do they try to go in a completely different direction? And then if you do go in a different direction, how do you do that?
I was going to say, that is one of the weird things when I went into the Ministry of Magic area in the Epic Universe, was because there's a lot of the familiar music and things like the background, but it doesn't match up. It's not like familiar locations and stuff. So then there's some places where it's more original, and it's just like, what's even happening? But it does. You still. One thing I think one of you guys sent this across, but there's a Facebook post where it's AI generated, but it shows like the original Dumbledore, right? And then like an AI version of Let's Go Dumbledore. So it's got 9 of them. So you've got Quirrell, McGonagall, Dumbledore, Hagrid, Snape. And just, true to life, it's hilarious to read through some of the comments because people specifically like, it's AI generated. So the wig for Snape is not great.
It's
but these are
rough.
really
it's
funny.
rough. He looks like Cat Williams in that. Yeah, kind of does. I don't know.
I just in general, the Discord, the only thing that makes me mad is people that are so defensive of the movies who have never read the books. I'm like, go read the books and then you can be mad about this. That's fine. But like, don't just be a movie stan. I get it. They're very nostalgic. I get that they're a very significant part of a lot of people's childhoods, but there's so much more to the story. Go find out.
And that's what the series needs to bring. But yeah,
yes.
Because I think there was like, this is one of the castings where a race changed, where there was probably like a healthy way to critique it. And I think we've been through that. I hope we've done a good job of that. But the way that it's still going, people, it is what it is. We get to move on. You're not going to agree with every creative decision. Did you guys watch The Bear?
Announcements, though. People have time to get over it.
Yeah,
I haven't watched The Bear yet. I haven't. Want to, though.
Look, season 2.
I've watched season 1 and 2. I have not watched 3 or 4.
I don't love 3, which I think is pretty universal, but I just like hanging with the show. But anyway, Will Poulter, spoiler, is in this show, and I would be happy for him to be like Lupin or Sirius, or someone suggested him for Gilderoy Lockhart. Anyway, big Will Poulter fan. I'm just putting it out there into the universe. And I wanted to know if you guys had watched The Bear, because it's like one of those summer binges. Oh, and we all watched We Were Liars, which is very different.
Oh, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it. But I read the book.
You just read the book, though.
I haven't had time. I don't have this time. You have a child soon. Well, actually, you'll have plenty of time because you'll have a newborn. You won't care. That's when I watched Game of Thrones, when I had a newborn. But The Bear, I watched season 1 and 2, which is amazing. But everyone was so on season 3. I just kind of didn't.
I did watch 1, 2, 3. I just haven't watched the new season yet, and it's
okay. I've only not
quality
seen
television, but season 3 was a dip.
I haven't seen the last 3 or 2.5 episodes yet, but I've been working very long hours. It sounds like a humble brag, but I've been at Wimbledon, so it's just when you're on site and you work in sport, it is a longer day and it's pretty tough commute because it's just craziness. And so I'm getting behind on my TV. And yeah, once this baby comes around, I guess I'm gonna have to watch some TV to kill time. But like Hannah and I did burn through a couple things, and she's we've been watching a lot of Lost. We're midway through season 3, and I'm still really enjoying it. I'd say there's a couple lulls.
That's when Lost was good, though. Season 3, getting to 4, it kind of drops off, and then
there's a couple of moments I'm really anticipating, and then we're going to be so close to the end because those later seasons are actually quite short that I think we'll just finish it. But yeah, I'm behind on my movie watching. I'm not going to get to the theaters probably for Jurassic Park or Fantastic Four.
That's where you get lost. That's where it dwindles. You don't leave the house, so you just start watching home things. But I've been watching this little show called Schitt's Creek for the 15th time. So no, I don't watch anything new. I just watch the same stuff. But I need to be better. Okay, but I have something to say about Papa Sidhu. He's still on the IMDb. I don't know if the rumors about him.
I haven't heard anything more since then. Yeah,
but I realized something that I have really seen him in something, and it's that Genie movie. You guys.
The Christmas one?
The Christmas one. I did not realize that was him. I was like, oh. And I obviously looked at what he has done, and he's done a lot of stuff, but I was like, I did see him. It's the Genie movie. He was pretty good at that.
I'll have to go look at it. I haven't seen that
Not a Snape at all, but he was good at it.
everything I see from him makes me think that he's going to be a really good actor. So he's going to make it work. I'm more worried about the story around him. I'm sure whatever cog he has to fill as the actor is going to go well. It's like how, look, we watched Snow White and they didn't change it as much as I thought they would. I do think she's a fantastic performer overall. And I was like, it still had that Disney feel. I get why people liked and didn't like it. It all made sense, but like it was more something we just watched on Disney Plus one night. But I was like, all that hoopla over like, guys, we're just going to sit down and watch something and be entertained.
It wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't.
I took my kids to see it.
It wasn't the movie itself, though. It was her being out in the media trying to like tell anyone who wasn't going to go see the movie they were terrible people and stuff. But it was funny. There's a really interesting article the other day I saw about I think it's Steven Spielberg saying like I tried to warn them about her. Like she's not one who's easy to work with apparently behind the scenes.
It's rough because like there are things that can be updated in those, and there's a tactful way to do publicity. She simply said a few things in a really bad way. But the other thing was, you got to remember, you also have Gal Gadot, who's Israeli, who's been very outspoken. And then if your two stars are outspoken about opposite ends of a very polarizing topic, like that's just not going to be good for business. But you can only control the narrative so much. And I will say Gal Gadot, not good in that movie. I don't know if she's been good in a movie. I think she was so good in Fast Five, in a manner of speaking, that I've overlooked everything else.
You just took that. I don't mind her.
Wonder Woman is not bad yet.
The first one is not bad. I think she does all right in that. And in this, I was surprised I didn't hate her song. Like I thought that was going to be awful. I actually thought they did a really good job working that to her voice, and I didn't mind it. But yeah, like I think it was all around. It's like the parents take the kids to the movies, and it's so finicky right now, people even going to the theater, that like if there's a reason not to go sit through Snow White, a parent's gonna not go sit through Snow White. But I also think, I don't know everything she said, and I do what she has said is rubbed me the wrong way, but it's like you put like this theater girl who gained fame by being on the internet, being loud theater girl, saying whatever she wants, and then you shove her in movies and expect her to be perfect. I don't know. There's a lot of things I would have said when I was that age that probably sound really stupid now, that I'm glad no one on a national level.
Remember, we've made notes. We're going to start announcing that.
I didn't think the romance changed that much in that movie. Anyway, look, moving on.
I didn't like the guy. He was
from Snow White. Yeah, I was surprised by that. But yeah, it's funny because this year there have been a couple of big kids hits back to back, and then it seems like it kind of ran out of steam, like because you had Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon, and there's one more before that, and then it almost makes you feel bad because then it's like, how many times can parents take their kids to the movies? Like you're obviously going to have a flop. Like this Elio movie really flopped, and I'm like, even if it's just not as good as the other Pixar ones, like I'm sad that an original idea didn't do well.
It was so good though, but people only go see this our whole podcast about Harry Potter reboot, but like people only go see like the rebooted stuff, and like they complain about it, but that's all people say. And Elio was actually, I won't say it was the best Pixar movie, but it was really sweet and cute. It never felt like it dragged. It was a good movie, and it just makes me sad that people went crazy for Stitch, it was good, but it was just Stitch, and the cartoon is better. So it's frustrating.
Never a Stitch guy. I've always felt like he's gotten too much publicity.
But as a movie-going family, we've loved it. We've loved how many kids' movies have been out, because during the summer, I'll just take my kids to the movie during the day, even if we've already seen the movie. So it's been nice to be able to do that. Like, just, there's been 3 kids' movies in the theaters at the same time. That's so rare. Usually there's 1 kids' movie at a time, and then if you don't like it...
And they stretch out over time.
Yeah.
We still want to go see Elio, so I'm glad to hear that, because it got pretty good reviews and stuff. I thought the ratings were good, or the Rotten Tomatoes and the audience score. So we were totally going to go see it. Just didn't work on our trips. And now that we're back, we're going to try and go.
And now, are there still? It's just hard when it's coming to Disney Plus. Like I obviously love going to the theater. I still have my pass, which I should probably cancel for a while. But it's like we didn't go see Moana 2, we didn't go see Lilo, and I know none of those were that exciting, but I think we would generally like, oh, there's a big new Disney movie out we'd like to go see, and nothing has attracted us.
That will change.
Well, yeah, well, of course, when our child can actually go, but I mean, I don't know. Who knows what'll do it? Like Snow White, what's interesting about that is I'm like, what? Maybe it was right for a remake. It was made in the 30s. So
yeah, I actually think they could have changed a lot more. Like if you watch the original Snow White, there's not much there besides like the Seven Dwarfs. So like
It
they
was
could have
just the
done so much
cool,
more.
like the first animated movie, right? They were kind of like just reveling in like, look at how cool this can be with the first full length.
But I think too, it's like with the streaming now, obviously that does change things. But for like you, Mitchell, who are a young couple with no kids right now in this moment, you guys
for another day, hopefully.
You know, you're gonna save like the Disney movies for Disney Plus or whatever. And like for our family, it's like, well, me and Isaac are gonna save 28 days later for streaming because getting someone to watch the kids and all that stuff just to go to a movie, it's just where you are in life. But go to the movies either which way you can.
Yeah. It's funny because now that we never bought concessions growing up. Maybe Dad would get popcorn once in a while, but like Hannah's a big concessions person, and now I tell myself, I'm like, oh, movie theaters are dying and don't make money off of tickets. They make money off of tickets, and that's how I lie to myself so that I can spend more money on.
But it's
ridiculous
a truth.
fresh food. No,
unless it's a specific theater chain, which their freaking prices are ridiculous. I'm not going to say their name, but it really does. If you want to help your local theater, buy concessions.
If you can go to an independent theater, but like part of the reason people go to the theater now is for an event. Like everyone was like, oh, F1, like Top Gun Maverick is going to be better on a giant screen. And I very much am having a tough time that I didn't get to see it. Hannah just doesn't even think Brad Pitt's that hot. So I couldn't. Now it was like 90 degrees. So I was like, maybe I can convince her, but then we have to pay for an Uber both ways and her ticket. And anyway, but that's one where you want the big experience, which, you know, you can't go to an independent theater for. London is actually a fantastic place for independent cinemas, as they call them here, but they don't put butter on their popcorn. So you win some, you lose some. Anyway, did you guys have any other happenings this summer or pop culture things that you needed to talk about before we give some Harry Potter hot takes and get out of here?
I don't think so. I think it's a good summer for like media and stuff. Like I said, there's a good number of streaming series that have come out. There's been some really good movie releases. So, and just 2025 in general, you look at like the Marvel movies that are coming out. Like it's a fun year.
I think because
so
of the strike, like enough
about.
things got pushed into this section. And the weird thing about Marvel is after I did not realize that there's no Marvel movie coming out between Fantastic Four and the first big Avengers. What's it called? Doomsday. And which is a little bit wild. And if it was like 6 months or 8 months, but it's 18 months without a Marvel movie, which will be interesting. And obviously Thunderbolt's terrible at the box office, but good reviews. So we need that to. It was good. I enjoyed it. I did go see it.
Example of what you were talking about, Mitchell, was like it's hard to get a babysitter. My wife doesn't like Marvel, so like I'll go see those ones sometimes. But like this time, I was like, I'll just wait for it to come out on Disney Plus. And now I wish I'd gone so I could, I want them to keep making the good ones.
I'll move to Florida and we'll move somewhere a little bit better, and then I'll move where you are, and then I'll just be like sleepover, and then they can tag team and we go to the cinema once a week.
Let's do it.
All right, we're gonna give some Harry Potter hot takes, so we can apply on how these can maybe be adjusted for the television series, so that we can relate everything back to that TV show that's not going to come out for 18 months that we've been talking about for 8 months. But Steven, do you want to kick us off with, like, I brought like 1.5, and I'm not gonna lie, they're not the most articulated, but just let us know, what is a hot take you have chose to bring us today?
Oh man, well, mine is a little well, I've got a couple, and it's for me they were the most interesting ones. I started thinking through this is kind of because it forces you to look at like the whole series through kind of a different lens. And so I think the first one is around Dumbledore being a what did I take yours, Jamie?
No, keep going. We'll see. Maybe we have opposing hot takes. I don't know.
Well, just because Dumbledore, I mean, he's kind of painted as, this hero and everything, but really when it comes down to it, like, I think of it as he just chose a different greater good, and he was willing to make certain sacrifices along the way to get to the greater good, which in this case was, the defeat of Voldemort. And, but yeah, if you look at kind of what he planned for Harry, what he expected to happen to Harry over the years, pretty messed up. And so if you just think of, Dumbledore as this master planner manipulator, like he knew from very early on that Harry was going to have to die, and he was doing all of this stuff to get Harry in the right place at the right time so he could, impact the plan, and then he could at the right moment. So it really is just a much darker take on Dumbledore and his motivation, I think, because I think that we believe that he cared about Harry, but it's almost makes it worse if it's someone that you like come to know and care about, and now you're gonna go and I don't know, sacrifice them because that's what the plan requires. It's a little dark.
Like
a little dark.
a lot of pieces of pop culture and history have like savior characters. And a lot of times there's a prophecy or there's a wise person attached who knows the things that it's going to take. And oftentimes, obviously, that character, because it's a savior complex, returns in some way, overcomes that death as Harry does. And Dumbledore supposedly was hoping that would how it go along, but he didn't know. But I don't know. It's that I just think it could be argued that that is an essential part of story, and that then you're having to look without kind of having to block out that, like you said, it's for the greater good. But is that it was less bad things than would have happened for the other greater good that he could have pursued, I suppose.
It was a greater good. Greater good.
Can I give mine?
Greater good. Yeah.
I prepared this whole thing. You guys just wiped it out. No, just kidding. So my hot take was a defense of Dumbledore, because I don't feel like 10 years ago this would have been a hot take. But like this last while, I think as like we've all grown into like adults, a lot of people have re-examined the series and they're like, what the hell was Dumbledore doing? So my whole thing is just like, I actually think for some reason people forgive other people in that mentor roles in series in a different way than Dumbledore. I actually don't think Dumbledore is that different from Gandalf or what's Moraine in Wheel of Time?
Oh, Moraine, yeah.
Or even Professor X. These people who take young children in Lord of the Rings, they're necessary children, but they're childlike and they're little, and put their
they're
lives
naive.
at risk because they're the only ones who can save the world. You think of like even Ender's Game. There's other places in literature and even in movies where it's like children are taken and given these tasks. And yes, Dumbledore is doing that. And I think we all just grew up reading the books and believing, because our introduction to Dumbledore outside of the very first dropping Harry off is through Hagrid and everyone talking about how great he is and how he can do no wrong. But I think a whole point of the series is growing up with Harry and realizing, which is like a big moment in the books, Harry realizing that Dumbledore was just human, and also his plan all along wasn't to save Harry, it was to save the world. And yes, there is the part of like, did he give up on for the greater good when he's kind of sacrificing Harry for the greater good? I get that, but overall, I do think Dumbledore was justified in what he was doing, and I do think there needs to be a little leeway because there's a lot of other mentors in stories that do very similar things, and people just beat up on Dumbledore, and I get very defensive of him. Anyway.
See, you just said it much better than I did.
One of my hot takes.
Well, and I think for me, because it's also not something I wholeheartedly believe, but I think for me, a lot of it is just kind of the understanding or making assumptions, I guess. But to what degree was Dumbledore acting or, playing a part in order to make things go a certain way? And at what point did he really care? And it really hurt him to sacrifice Harry in that sense.
And a lot of people argue that like, he left him with the Dursleys. But Dumbledore even says, I believe in book 5, that he did not realize the Dursleys were going to treat Harry that badly, that he thought they would grow to love him like their own child. Should he have checked in more? I don't know. He was busy doing other stuff. He's running a school. He's on the Gamat thing, whatever.
Gamat.
And then in the end, that was the one way to protect Harry, was to have him be with Petunia. And that's what he had to do. And so there's also the balance of that, like that had to strengthen Harry to be able to overcome so much more, whatever.
No, I think you're right. And there is, look, in all storytelling, like there has to be a suspension of disbelief when there's a plot hole or there's a character who's a plot device in themselves. And I think if you read a hero's journey, you just realize that some people are in roles. And I think it's a testament to Dumbledore that he is interesting enough that he supersedes that in some ways. And then, anytime you take a step back and you're like, that's just, you can kind of simplify it see it from a different perspective, partially because you've grown up and partially just because as you read over and over again, you start to see things in a slightly different way. But
Well, I've always compared like the Dumbledore thing to like your parents. You grow up and you just, I mean, for most people, some people aren't so fortunate, I guess, to grow up this way, but you grow up thinking your parents are right about everything. You idealize who your parents are up until like a certain age. And then you slowly begin to realize that your parents are humans and they have their own flaws. And maybe you have different thoughts or feelings about things. And that's kind of Harry's journey with Dumbledore, which I think makes the story complex and gives depth to it, is that Dumbledore isn't like just this perfect being who knows exactly what's going to happen. Because if he did, then what would be the point of the story? He would have fixed everything before.
Mom, I hope you skipped that
Sure
whole part.
me on a
I would
side
accept for
note,
Mom.
because we're living that, because my kids, I think some of them are in that phase. They're starting to realize that I don't know everything. But one of my younger kids, I overheard that it was like, I'm going to go ask Dad. And my older kids were like, Dad doesn't know. And it was like, Dad knows. But I don't remember how he said exactly. But basically, Dad knows everything. And they're like, no, he doesn't. And I was like, don't tell him that.
That's so sweet.
He's supposed to think that I know everything.
But our generation as parents, we have AI. So we really do know it.
If you can give me 30 seconds over here with my phone, I can tell you.
I think because your parents are giving you all of your information and your teachers, like, and you're taught to like trust, invest. And now I'm like, I can't imagine that mindset. And even when a kid's friend tells them something like, oh, but my mom says this, it's like, I hope they believe me over their friend's mom. Like, I'm already worried my kids, I'm not going to be able to brainwash them enough. Oh gosh. And then they have to deprogram
when their
that,
friend's
like,
mom tells them things they want to hear, like, you can totally eat cake right before bed. Then they want to believe their friend's mom, and you are just the devil. So
like
welcome
when
to
Maria's
that club,
mom
Mitchell.
was like, just drink Coke, it's no big deal, and then we'll snort it later. No, that's a real story, by the way. I tried Coke with Maria for the first time, and Coca-Cola. Obviously, I said that earlier because I was a kid. Oh my Lanta,
my butterscotch butterbeer here.
Butterbeer.
But it is true. Like, I don't know, because I was a pretty questioning kid and like a smart A and everything, but I still like
still is.
Yeah, but I don't know. I still, trusted. And yeah, as you realize, like, people are human and flawed, I guess that is a very good comparison. My hot take is on the other side of the war, and it is simply, I feel like I've given 100 hot takes throughout this, like Harry and Hermione's not a hot take anymore. But anyway, it is just that Voldemort is actually not a good villain, not a well-developed villain, because he is born evil, and I don't believe that his path towards power is actually motivated properly. And I think the good part is his obsession with Harry. I think that is fairly well done. I just don't think that I think he's scary. I think he represents evil, but I just think his backstory is essentially that he was meant to be evil. And yes, he has the abandonment, but also he is just from this line of Slytherins that are all horrific people, and then a path of muggles that are like the biggest Karens and douchebags and posh noble a-holes. He essentially was destined to be a horrible person. Like, they say you're not born great, you have greatness thrust upon you. He was born evil, and he represents it well, but he's not actually that good at being evil. There's all these jokes about like how successful all these other villains are and how Voldemort couldn't kill a teenager, which is just a meme, but impartially it's true. I think, look, obviously the way that the plot comes together, I am not faulting J.K. Rowling as a writer or the evil that she put in front of Harry and what he overcame. Yeah. I just simply think that Voldemort is not actually that interesting or multidimensional of a character.
Have you heard the theory, though, because there's a theory out there that because Voldemort was conceived, and I think, well, not born, but he was conceived while his father was on love potion, that because like of that, he's incapable of feeling love or empathy. And so he was born, yes, a villain, but it's because he was born a sociopath. Because he didn't have.
But then he's Michael Myers. He's just walking around killing people. The lack of love thing like matters, but again, then he never had a chance.
Yeah. Argument against that is that yes, he was born evil. He is pure evil. But I think what makes him a great villain from that is the effect he has on other people. So he's like a real life.
What was his sales pitch?
Symbol.
I don't understand why why is he a good cult leader? Like, cult leaders have charm. Not that there's gray area. Obviously, I don't want him to be morally gray.
Charming. He was charming before the books when he was younger.
He seduced with power.
Yes,
but how did
that's a huge thing in the world.
I don't know. But I just didn't see how he was attracting these. I didn't get it.
But his seduction to me was based on the fact that he preyed on seduction, not that way. I'm not into that no nose face. Was that he preyed upon what people wanted. So he like took up the mantle of power for whatever he knew he could manipulate people. And since it was such a big thing about being a full-blooded wizard versus not, he took advantage of that and he showed people's true colors. But I think what really makes him complex is that even though he personifies evil and all that stuff, he's still not immortal. That's what he wants. He wants to live forever. And so it adds this element of humanness to him because he's not a god. He's not anything like that, where he's just trying to live forever. So he has to navigate in the world in a way to get that power. And in the end, that's all he really wants. He doesn't really, I mean, we know he doesn't care about his Death Eaters. He doesn't, but he manipulates people. He turns people against each other in like a political way, which I think is really cool, but also like a moral way. And creates all this chaos.
I just don't. What does he get out of living forever? Like, he wants power. He wants the wizarding world to rule. But does he actually want to be a ruler and have control? Does he crave that control? I don't feel like we get enough of that.
Well, here's what I think. I think that one thing that's a really important piece you get at book 2 is when Harry's, talking about how he was supposed to be in Slytherin, right? He only got put in Gryffindor because he chose it, right? Now, that's a really important piece of the story is that Voldemort not only had these tendencies to do evil things, but he actively not only chose to do terrible things like torture the other kids in the orphanage, but then he realized he had this charm and he could get people around him to do things as well. And so it was this manipulating or moving other people to also, feed his agenda. I think his wanting to live forever was really based out of fear. Like, ever since he was a kid, right? He knew that he got out of the orphanage, his mom died. He never wanted to die. He was afraid of it. And then when he found out he was magical, it was like, oh, I could use this to avoid death, right?
I thought, why would I die?
Unknown. Yeah. Whatever. But he really did like the power. He enjoyed having, he learned that's something he's supposed to have learned from Slughorn, right? Is like this idea of like, oh, I can get all these other people to do my bidding and to kind of, shape everything around me. So I think that his ultimate goal was to avoid death. But I think his secondary goal was he wanted to be able to control everything. He wanted to be the absolute ruler.
And I think overall the purpose of his character is to be a warning about what happens when you don't have love. Like, what are you living for if you don't have those things like love? And so he's looking for revenge, power. He fears death. And so he's just stripped of all that. And so, I don't know. It's like, do you think Sauron's a bad character?
Yeah, Sauron is purely a figurehead. That's why you have Sauron and Saruman, because you almost have to represent evil in multiple ways. And I'm not saying that, I think it's funny because people say Marvel villains are all bad. And I'm like, the execution of the storytelling, and especially their downfall and what you can show in the film when you're centering it on the hero, I think it is true. It's not always a good depiction, but I like a lot. There are a lot of bad Marvel movies that I'm like, oh, the way they actually gave this villain a backstory is interesting. Or I know people say Killmonger is a good villain because he had a point in the way they developed him and countered a Black Panther. I was like, I think that people have taken that recipe and done a pretty good job with it. I just think with Voldemort, we're told he's charming, but we really only see it a couple times, and I'm not convinced by it. I would say we're told, not shown, and it's more when he's younger. But everyone, he gets the weak, like Peter Pettigrew, and he gets the ambitious. And so I get it. Obviously, I love the books. I think the character works completely. I just think it worked better when I was a kid to just feel like some of it is inherent and less earned than I expected.
It's something that they can do better with in the series.
I do think it's a much more common thing in the culture now to have a villain backstory. Where do villains come from? They're just like us, and that's almost more scary. And that's obviously not a thing here. It's more this is what pure evil can look like when they have nothing else to live for, and how they can manipulate everyone else. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
That's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine nowadays, though, is this, because I get it adds a lot of depth to tell us the backstory of villains, but they treat it almost like, oh, they're villains because this thing happened to them, and therefore it's almost not their fault that they're villains. I feel like that's a really lame excuse. Some stories have done it really well, but others it's just like, I'm not gonna buy that, you know?
Well, like,
so it almost makes me miss the old Disney villain days when it was just they're bad because they're bad. That's all you need to know, you know? But
to watch Descendants. My daughter watches them many times.
I've seen way too much Descendants. Let me tell you. Your daughter got my daughter into Descendants, and now I cannot get it off of my TV. Oh, and they moved on to Zombies now, though. The new zombie movie is coming out next
we're going
week.
to the concert.
And I know
we're
it
going.
because they talk about it constantly. There's a concert. Oh, don't tell my children.
I know that these things exist, and I can picture them, like, and I can name some of the actors, but I watched Teen Beach Movie, but I could not tell you one thing. That's when I was, maybe that's the last time a Disney Channel original movie made it into my orbit in any way, shape, or form, but I could not tell you one thing about those. Except for the zombies, so funny, they keep meeting new things. Like, they meet, there's vampires, then there's ninjas, then
Vampires is the new one.
Okay. The new one's vampires. Yeah.
Wait, so what is the OG one?
It's just the zombies.
And humans?
Regular people and zombies and there's werewolves.
Yeah.
Werewolves, that's it. Plants? Do they do zombies versus
and
plants?
Somehow they all learn to live together in harmony at the end of every movie.
Everyone comes together.
One more thing I wanted to say about villains was, I think there's obviously gray area villains, like you said, Steve, like you're trying to give a little bit more motivation and depth, but I think people are even taking fairly straightforward villains and trying to humanize them. There's obviously always been like this, the bad boy is sexy, but there are some characters that are actually horrible people that we need to stop trying to be like, no, it's actually a gray area because trauma. I'm like, no, it's a bad person. It's okay that they had trauma, but stop. You can find them hot without worshiping them.
Mitchell's gonna go off on his Draco thing again.
So I do actually have another hot take.
Yeah, should we we'll do a little quicker round here. Steve, give us your hot take.
So mine's actually tied to kind of what we're talking about, and it is, well, there's a couple pieces to it. So the very first one is that the majority of the story, at least in the books, is told from Harry's perspective. And so the idea being that Harry is not a reliable narrator. And so we have certain events that happen from a different perspective, right? Like that we kind of know happen the way that they happen because it's not Harry's brain that we're seeing the story through. But it's a little convenient, right? That Harry shows up and he's the Quidditch star, right? And then he's, the chosen one, and he's like the special one who's going to save everything, It's like, is he, because we all know people like this, right? Who they tell you the story about what's going on in their lives, and somehow they are right all the time. They're the hero, and everybody else is just screwing everything up, and they need to get out of the way. And sometimes it's kind of like, Harry's telling us this story it's a little too convenient how right he is all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Telling us the story, or
it's not first person?
This isn't like Lord of the Rings, Name of the Wind,
third story narrator,
A Song of Ice and Fire. Those are all actually written by characters. That is unreliable.
But it's like, Harry, it is third person, but it is very much to like Harry's perspective, and like even when other people are like thinking or doing, it's like Harry assuming their motivation. So it's a really interesting thing to think through. Like, okay, we got to know the ending more or less, but do we know? Is that really how it all went down? Was it really that, like,
revisionist?
He's not good at Quidditch just naturally?
Hard disagree.
Okay, first of all, disclaimer: I don't support AI creativity that substitutes or takes away from jobs of people. You should use AI in productive ways for you, but we should not be consuming BS AI art. That being said, have you guys been seeing the Harry Potter like fake TV show AI creations on TikTok? Because some of them are like that. They're like Harry just BSing, being like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna say this way because I'm freaking Harry Potter, and it is actually quite funny. Yeah, I don't support these things. Funny. Tim sends me them all the.
And people aren't profiting off of them.
I'm trying to think. Well, they're taking away views from real creators.
That's true.
I'm trying to think of a non-character based hot take, but my other one is that Dobby is really annoying.
Oh,
and even though I want more Dobby in the show. I want him to actually do what he does in the books, but actually, other than dying, does he do anything enjoyable? Like, does he do anything that's fun? Like, helpful? I don't.
It's a very common thing that in the second book, you do not like Dobby. Dobby is annoying.
He is annoying. You warm up to him over time, but I'm actually like, does he ever do anything to
is where he becomes useful. He gives Harry the gillyweed. He helps him find the room requirement.
Bothers me that he doesn't want to wear
Winky
matching
when
socks.
She's drunk. He takes care of her.
Takes care of my Winky.
Pay good money for that. Okay.
But I agree in some ways, but I think he grows on you as like, he's like the annoying little brother. And then
I'm curious what the voice
dies.
is going to sound like, actually. Maybe I should audition for that because the voice is so annoying.
They made him annoying.
But you
Doesn't
know what?
Toby
Jim Dale do it?
Doesn't Toby what's his face do it? Toby,
I don't know.
what's the actor? He was in that
Maguire? That's the only Toby that comes to mind.
Yes.
I was doing Spider-Man and Dobby at the same time.
That's how he's so rich. Toby Jones.
Wait, Toby Jones. But I want to finish. So the other piece of my hot take, right, is that we get this all through Harry's perspective, and so we get that Harry's right, Dumbledore's right, and Voldemort's the bad guy, right? But at the end of the day, everybody just has their own idea of the greater good, right? So, like, had Voldemort won, or had we got the book through Voldemort's perspective, which would be a really fun fanfic to read. Now that I think about it, I wonder if that one's out there. Like, is it that their concept of society and getting there, they probably thought that was a really good thing, and so we just did never get their perspective on it.
You're getting into some apologists kind of. No, because
he's a little too murderous and torturous, Steve.
Genocide. There's other things happening in the books not through Harry's perspective that make it clear that this is the right path, and also Harry, it's not always going his way. He has a hard time with being the chosen one. People are mean to him. He has to come to terms with who Dumbledore really is. There's a lot of things that happen. It doesn't.
That's what I'm saying. But if I'm telling a story, I'm gonna make it like it was hard, you guys.
He's not the narrator
because of all of these things.
He's not the narrator.
It's funny that you said that because I just, you think about how many fiction stories are actually written by a main character, and sometimes but I think you're off on this one. I think there maybe is a more interesting story if maybe like Dumbledore does turn bad, and that is something that we didn't understand or happened at some point, but he dies, so it doesn't matter. And I do think he starts out so whimsical. What I want to know, how there's all these stories told about how when George Lucas did A New Hope, like they weren't twins, he wasn't his dad, like all this stuff happened between movie 1 and 2, and he really thought out the trilogy, and apparently further on. I do wonder, we know how much, like there were certain things that were set from 1. I wonder how much changed, because there's some things that are so, I knew they had to humanize Dumbledore eventually, but he's so whimsical and other in the first book. I'm really curious how much of that backstory was in her head beforehand, because I do think, for all the flaws we've said of Dumbledore and Voldemort, they are interesting, good characters. But I think Dumbledore going bad, or essentially Grindelwald is the bad version of Dumbledore, I think that is a very much more interesting, for the greater good story. Also made me think of Dune, because spoiler alert, Paul Atreides is going to do some wild stuff in the name of the greater good.
Well, and I think too, kind of to Steven's point, like book 1, Harry's only 11 years old, and so maybe we're getting an idealized version of Dumbledore in that way. Like, but he is more fun, more descriptive of what his name is. He's not yelling at anyone but the Goblet of Fire. So I think too, and I do not think J.K. sitting on that train writing the book, maybe she had like an overall idea of how the whole series would end, but like as someone who's like a first time pretty much author, like she had written before but she hadn't been published or anything like that, like was she really like, okay, this is gonna be 7 books and this is what's gonna happen?
There's a lot that happens between that treatment phase and the outlines and as you flesh things out. I could totally get that. It developed, and
she might have known some bits, like 7 books for 7 years, but who knows if she knew how many years. It's just interesting when it blew up in popularity, and as the story expands, like you've got to keep track of a lot of storylines and make it all cohesive. And I think she lands the plane pretty well, and we're seeing other authors have issues as their stories grow along. I'm reading the second book in the Stormlight Archive, and it really solidly focuses on like 3.5 characters, but it still feels quite epic. And that's where I think like the way that George R.R. Martin just had so many different plates spinning, but all of them were interesting and great stories. It almost makes you appreciate the simplicity of Harry Potter as something that started out as children's fantasy and moved into maybe more of like a straightforward mystery adult in a magical world. I mean, I shouldn't say just a mystery, because obviously it's got like fantastical and epic qualities, and the world is at stake. But anyway, do you guys have any final hot takes that you need to bring to this hot summer pod?
My only other one was more a hot take for young Jamie, because Sirius Black was like my favorite character when I was younger.
Too.
But basically, and I do still love him as a character, and I actually love him because I'm realizing he was more complex, but he was kind of a horrible godfather, would have been a horrible parental figure, and Mrs. Weasley was right the whole time.
Yeah, you see that? No, but he is, I think I definitely noticed how much more immature. Like, he's the cool uncle brother figure that maybe Harry wanted and needed, but he should have not put him forward as a father figure. Hagrid also not a good father figure.
That's the best. Well, I will say Sirius. I mean, because Sirius went to jail at how old was he supposed to be
it's
when that happened? 20?
Yeah, like 20.
He was in jail for
Arrested
he never grew up. Yeah.
Yes.
He definitely arrested development.
Going into his dog form to survive. But he just wanted to
more
relive
time as a dog those years.
His life with James, and Molly was right. But it's still probably better than the Dursleys. Less abuse, I don't know.
I don't know. I have this, obviously then the story wouldn't happen, but I'm like, the Dursleys, all they had to do was treat Harry just the way they treat Dudley, and then he would have rejected the magical world. And I think that's interesting. I'm going to write that fanfic. And then Harry becomes an accountant for a drill company and falls in love with a Karen named Karen.
Total D-bag. Named Karen. The worst kind of Karen.
And Voldemort
my final hot take. Here's my final one. This is just like a short one, but my final hot take is that Quidditch is actually, besides the flying around on broomsticks part, is a really stupid game. Like, how does any of that supposed to work? And how would people watch? How would you have games that went on for days? People would be like, I'm out of here. Like, nothing's going to freaking happen.
I think even as it's designed, which is funny because I want them to have all the Quidditch from the books in the show, because it actually generally moves the story forward. But this, like, even if the sport is a 2-hour match, like, it doesn't actually make sense, because 15 goals is a lot. And the thing, you have to be that far ahead and have a crap state. Like, it doesn't actually work as a sport. And for some reason, really tiny countries are really good at it. It doesn't.
I don't mind it.
But
I do love the idea of bludgers, though. I would like to insert bludgers into basketball, for example. I think that would make that a much more fun. Baseball could use some kinetic energy.
If the audience just had
arms.
Those soft dodgeballs, the ones you used in elementary school, and who could just throw them at the pitcher. I think it would make baseball so much more entertaining.
Just like one per game. The pitcher or the basketball player never knows when or where it's coming from. You guys, you remember the show American Gladiators?
Yes.
Which they rebooted once as well. There's one here called Gladiators. I don't know if it came first or not, but they resurrected it 2 or 3 years ago, and it is huge. And the only clip I ever see is just someone throwing a random ball, and I'm like, that should be a part of more sports. It should just be allowed, and they should call it a bludger. I'm going to call the Gladiator producers and just say, call it a bludger, because Quidditch, the real sport, actually sucks, and they've changed the name of it because they don't want to be associated with J.K. Rowling, which is quite a chuckle. But you know what was good was the PlayStation 2 Quidditch World Cup game. Really good. Very good video game.
I don't mind it as a sport.
Jamie, it makes no sense.
I mean, it's really a sport about catching the snitch.
That's for the whole sport to be based on one player.
Like, isn't football about the quarterback throwing the ball good?
No, because the receiver has to catch it.
The ball really good, they get 7 points, and that's what the other quarterback can do. The same thing. 50 points compared to a 10-point
That's
goal.
like if Jerry Rice ran around the stadium, and if he catches the ball, it's over. That's it.
It's like a soccer tournament, right? It's about the score you have overall, not about just winning that game, or is it about just winning that game?
No, it's about winning that game.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, it's kind of true. They reference it kind of like
Jamie knows nothing.
Because the number of points you earn over the season is actually what matters, right? I think winning gets you a certain amount too, or something.
Well, if you win, you get 3 points.
Number of points to get a life.
So how much should the snitch be worth?
Because remember, in book 3, they have to beat Slytherin by 100 and whatever points in order to win the world or the
I guess they do cumulative, but
championship. I can't remember what it's called. The Quidditch.
The snitch ending the game is also kind of a flaw. Like, that's so random. Look, it's fun, creative, interesting. Yeah, so I don't know. Make it an hour.
You can't get all the dynamics around the time running out. All that kind of stuff is gone once you introduce the.
I'm sure it could be.
I just think I think she made it weird, and it was cool, but it was not fleshed out very well.
Why don't they have to bounce the basketball anymore?
They do, Stephen A. Smith. What in the world is this? This is First Take on HPTV. All right.
I know nothing about sports. I just
you
watch them.
You should take on the whole sports world.
That is lies. I do know more about sports than a lot of people. But I do enjoy Quidditch because Harry wins a lot. But I guess it's just because he's good at the one job that matters.
Or at least he tells us he is.
Harry does suffer, like you're kind of saying, with the unreliable. I don't think it relates to being an unreliable narrator, but Harry does, like, he is literally a main character in him where he's just a little too good at a handful of things. And, anyway.
Bludgers help. Just hit the bludgers at
if
the secret
nothing
the whole
else,
time.
the book is written from the perspective of a big Harry Potter fan, right? It's like someone who likes Trump writing a book about him compared to someone who hates Trump writing a book about it. You're going to get a very different perspective. We got someone who loves Harry Potter.
The events happened how
I
they
feel
happened,
like it may not
Steven.
be 100% honest.
Steven's hot take is cold.
Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed our rambling about our summer pop culture happenings and giving some hot-ish takes. It's hard because every hot take's been hot taked for Harry Potter, really. But we're never going to get sick of talking about it. And next week, we're going to keep talking. And we're going to talk about Jamie's favorite film of all time. 5 stars on Letterboxd, in her top 4.
Not even marked on my letterbox. Embarrassing.
No. Fantastic Beasts and the Crime. Yeah? And the Crimes of Grindelwald. And the Crimes of Grindelwald, which I've definitely watched already no, I haven't. And so we're going to watch that one so that we can get excited to visit Wizarding Paris, even though Steven's already been there, that hoe. But if you want to suggest an episode theme for us, if you want to give us your Harry Potter hot take, please, comment on this video and let us know your thoughts, but also follow us on socials at HPTVPod on TikTok and Instagram. And you can email us if you'd like also as well. Write a little personal, nice love letter or hot take at hptvpodcast@gmail.com. I wanted to add one more thing, and I'm so sorry because screw AI, but I saw some AI renderings of just like the actors in these robes, and I was like, those robes are sick. Anyway. Hopefully the costume department is putting together some really cool stuff that they didn't get inspired by AI for. Anyway, Jamie, send us out.
Peace out, snitches.